My hands were trembling as I stood in the cluttered kitchen. The smell of various dishes blended into a heavy aroma that seemed to weigh down the air. I am Evelyn Harper, a 30-year-old woman who had found herself in a life far different from the one I had envisioned. Married to David, a man 3 years my senior, our union was supposed to be a new beginning. But instead it felt like an end. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the kitchen as another plate slipped from my grasp, fracturing into countless pieces on the tiled floor. It was an accident, a simple mishap, but to me it felt like a metaphor for my life. Broken, fragmented, irreparable. Can't you even prepare properly? Hurry up and serve the food. You're causing trouble for Mom, David muttered, his words laced with irritation, as he grabbed an extra bottle of wine and left the kitchen without offering a hand. His indifference cut deeper than the sharp edges of the broken plates. As I crouched down to clean up the mess, a sense of despair enveloped me. Why was it always me bearing the brunt of everything? The injustice of it all gnawed at my heart. That's when Arthur, my father-in-law, appeared in the doorway. He was in his early 60s, a man who usually kept to himself, especially since he worked away from home. His eyes widened in surprise as he took in the chaos of the kitchen, the plethora of dishes I had prepared single-handedly. So many. Did you make all of this by yourself? His voice was tinged with genuine concern, a stark contrast to the coldness I had grown accustomed to. I couldn't help the sarcasm that tinged my voice as I responded, a tired smile on my face. It's always like this. My words were heavy, carrying the weight of countless unspoken grievances. Arthur's expression shifted from surprise to concern, then to a quiet anger as he observed my weary demeanor. It was clear he noticed the drastic change in my appearance since our last meeting, an exhausted shell of the once vibrant woman I used to be. I'm going to ask my wife what she's thinking. You come too, he said decisively, guiding me towards the living room. I followed, the fragments of the broken plate still in my hands, symbolizing the shattered remnants of my once hopeful dreams. As we walked, I couldn't help but reflect on how drastically my life had changed since marrying David. The initial joy of our wedding had quickly dissolved into a relentless routine of servitude under the watchful eye of my mother-in-law. The love and partnership I had yearned for were nowhere to be found, replaced by a suffocating sense of isolation and despair. But as Arthur led me away from the kitchen, a tiny flicker of hope ignited within me. Perhaps this was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I could finally find my voice and break free from the chains of my unhappy marriage. Perhaps this was the beginning of a change, however small it might be. The living room felt like a different world compared to the chaotic kitchen I had just left. The guests mingled, laughing and chatting, oblivious to the turmoil in the other parts of the house. My mother-in-law, a picture of poise and elegance, was the center of attention, her laughter ringing clear and bright. As Arthur guided me into the room, the conversation slowly died down, the guests' curious eyes turning towards us. I stood beside Arthur, my hand still clutching the remains of the broken plate, a stark reminder of the reason I was there. Arthur cleared his throat, his voice steady but laced with an underlying fury that I had never heard from him before. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your presence today, he began, his words formal, but his tone indicating that something unusual was about to unfold. He turned to his wife, my mother-in-law, his eyes hard. Can you explain why Evelyn looks the way she does? Why she's been subjected to such treatment in our home? My mother-in-law's face paled, her composure faltering for a moment before she regained control. Arthur, let's not do this here. It's not appropriate in front of our guests. But Arthur was relentless. No, it's precisely because our guests are here that we need to address this. They deserve to know the truth behind the facade we've been presenting. The guests shifted uncomfortably, their expressions a mix of surprise and curiosity. My husband David, who had been entertaining a group of friends, looked bewildered, clearly unprepared for his father's outburst. Arthur continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. David, you knew about the situation. Why didn't you intervene? Why did you let your wife suffer in silence? David stammered, his usual confident demeanor crumbling. I thought it was a matter between Evelyn and my mother. I didn't think it was my place to interfere. Arthur's disappointment was palpable. You vowed to love and protect her. to share your life with her. Is this how you fulfill that promise? The room was silent, the tension thick in the air. I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. For the first time, someone was speaking up for me, acknowledging the injustice I had endured. But at the same time, I was afraid of the consequences this confrontation might bring. Arthur turned his attention back to the guests. I apologize for the disruption, but it was necessary. The well-being of my family is more important than maintaining appearances. With that, he took my hand and led me out of the room, leaving a stunned silence in our wake. As we walked away, I felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, things could start to change for the better. The following days were a whirlwind of emotion and confrontation. After Arthur's bold statement in the living room, the dynamics in the house shifted dramatically. My mother-in-law, previously the unchallenged matriarch, seemed to shrink under Arthur's disapproval. David was unusually quiet, avoiding eye contact as if ashamed. But it was the visit to the fertility clinic that brought everything to a head. For months, the unspoken blame for our childlessness had weighed heavily on me. The subtle insinuations, the disappointed looks, they all pointed to me as the cause. But the results from the clinic told a different story. Sitting in the doctor's office, clutching the reports that confirmed my fertility was not the issue, I felt a mix of vindication and sadness. Vindication, because I was not the problem. Sadness, because I knew this revelation would only further complicate my already strained marriage. I confronted David with the results one evening, his reaction a mixture of disbelief and defensiveness. "This can't be right," he muttered, scanning the papers with a frown. "There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, David," I said firmly, a newfound strength in my voice. "I'm healthy. The problem isn't with me." The revelation seemed to hit him hard. For the first time, I saw a crack in his usually composed exterior. He was silent for a long time, his eyes not meeting mine. "I don't know what to say," he finally whispered. "This isn't just about having a child, David," I continued, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "It's about us, our marriage. We can't keep living like this, blaming and hurting each other." David looked lost, torn between his loyalty to his mother and his responsibilities as my husband. It was clear that he had never considered the possibility that he might be the one with fertility issues. That night, we slept in separate rooms, the silence between us more profound than any argument. The next day, Arthur approached me, his expression solemn. "I spoke with David," he said. "He's agreed to undergo testing. Whatever the outcome, we need to face it together as a family." I nodded, not sure if our marriage could withstand this new challenge. But I was determined to face whatever came next with dignity and strength. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a voice, a say in my own life. And as I watched the sunset from the window, a sense of clarity washed over me. No matter what the future held, I was ready to face it head-on. The aftermath of the revelation at the fertility clinic rippled through our household, unsettling the precarious balance that had maintained for so long. David's reluctance to accept the possibility of his infertility, combined with the growing tension between him and his parents, created an atmosphere thick with unspoken accusations and silent recriminations. It was during this period of uncertainty that I realized how much I had changed. The once meek and accommodating Evelyn had evolved into someone stronger, more assertive. I no longer felt the need to tiptoe around my mother-in-law or seek David's approval for every little thing. This transformation was not lost on Arthur, who watched the changes with a mixture of surprise and approval. Then came the day of the party, a celebration for my mother-in-law's 60th birthday. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion, but the underlying tensions made it anything but. The guests, unaware of the family drama, chatted and laughed, creating a stark contrast to the strained smiles of my in-laws. I remember standing in the middle of the living room, the sound of clinking glasses and merry conversations around me, feeling utterly detached. It was as if I was observing someone else's life, not participating in my own. That was when Arthur decided to confront the situation head-on. In front of all the guests, he demanded an explanation for the way I had been treated. The room fell silent, all eyes on us. My mother-in-law tried to dismiss his concerns, but Arthur was relentless. He recounted everything, from the unfair distribution of household chores to the emotional neglect I had endured. He even brought up David's past, revealing that his previous marriage had ended under similar circumstances. David, caught off guard, could only stand there in stunned silence. The revelation that he had treated his ex-wife in the same way he was treating me was a shock to everyone, especially to me. I had known about his past, but the details had always been vague. The confrontation ended with Arthur declaring that things needed to change, starting with how I was treated in the household. It was a powerful moment, one that marked the beginning of the end of my marriage to David. In the days that followed, I made the difficult decision to file for divorce. It wasn't a decision I took lightly, but I knew it was the only way to regain control of my life. The process was painful, with David initially resisting the idea, but with Arthur's support and the evidence of emotional abuse he had recorded during the confrontation, the divorce was eventually granted. As I signed the papers, a sense of relief washed over me. It was over. I was free from the marriage that had slowly suffocated me. But with that freedom came a sense of uncertainty. What would my life be like now? Could I find happiness again? These were questions I couldn't answer yet. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. A year had passed since my divorce from David, a year of rediscovery and healing. The emotional turmoil that had once seemed unending was now a chapter of my past, a painful lesson that had shaped me into who I am now. In this newfound freedom, I reconnected with my passions and interests, things I had put aside during my marriage. I started painting again, a hobby I had loved but neglected. The colors on the canvas mirrored the emotions within me, vibrant and full of life. It was during this period of self-discovery that Arthur, who had become a father figure to me, introduced me to new experiences and helped me grow as a person. A colleague of his, Liam was kind, understanding, and most importantly, he respected me as an individual. Our relationship blossomed slowly, built on mutual respect and shared interests. 6 months into our relationship, Liam and I decided to get married. It was a simple ceremony, a stark contrast to my first wedding. There were no extravagant decorations or a long list of guests, just a few close friends and family members. Life with Liam was everything my first marriage wasn't. We supported each other's dreams and aspirations, celebrating our victories and comforting each other in our defeats. Our home was filled with laughter and love, a sanctuary where I could be myself without any pretenses. Then one day I discovered I was pregnant. The joy and surprise were overwhelming. All the fears and doubts that had haunted me during my first marriage melted away. I was going to be a mother, and Liam was ecstatic. We decided to share the news with Arthur first. After all, he had been the catalyst for the changes in my life. His role in helping me find happiness again was something I would always be grateful for. As we sat in Arthur's living room sharing the news, his eyes filled with tears of joy. "I knew it," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I always knew you deserved happiness, Evelyn." As I looked around the room at Liam's smiling face and Arthur's tearful eyes, I realized how far I had come. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but it had led me to this moment, a moment of pure, unadulterated happiness. I was no longer the Evelyn who had walked into that kitchen a year ago, burdened by the expectations of others. I was a new person, stronger, happier, and ready to embrace whatever the future held. And as I placed my hand on my growing belly, feeling the gentle flutter of new life, I knew that this was just the beginning. A new chapter in my life was about to start, and I was ready for it.